Hi, this is Tjeerd from Mobile System Design, and today I wanted to share what it means to be a mobile platform engineer. Now, I will share a Substack article with a lot of details where you can read at your own leisure about, expectations and like some examples of what it means to be a mobile platform engineer. And this is sort of a similar video, but it's more freeform. I'm not really following a script here. I'm just gonna ramble about what it means to be a mobile platform engineer, and then you can see, if it's something you like to do. Or if you're just curious what it means to be one, or if you work with platform engineers, well, maybe you get some different perspectives on how they work, what it means. You can decide that you can be one in the future. If you do get the chance to become one, I actually recommend doing it because it really helps you give more perspective about the mobile engineering in general. So my background is that I used to be a mobile platform engineer at ING for about 3 to 4 years, close to 4 years. So I did a lot of different work there, right? I started as a feature engineer, by the way, but because I was sort of involved with app-wide specific stuff, not just a feature, I got more and more drawn to the platform role. So, but what I mean with app-wide is really like things that help the entire application, like releases, building shared libraries, helping other teams with shared components, stuff like that. But once I got the platform engineering role, I did like a lot of work related to, turning a monolithic app into a modular app. Did big UI migrations. One of them is like a dark mode migration where there was absolutely no dark mode and semantic UI in the code base. So I helped basically migrate every feature and helped basically asked every team to migrate to dark mode. I wrote like shared low-level libraries, was involved with releases, quality standards, helped increase quality standards, helped with testing and make sure other teams tested, wrote tools, basically anything that helped another developer release. That was at least my goal as a platform engineer at least. So after ING, I joined Twitter, and there I was a feature engineer again. So I went from a feature engineer to platform engineer back to a feature engineer. But it gave me perspective again to be, after 4 years of not building features, to go back to building features. It's some interesting perspective you get again, what it means to be on the other side of the coin again, where you are delivering features, and both at quite large companies with serious code bases. So I wanted to share my perspective on what it means to be a platform engineer, and maybe you can see if it's something for you. Or at least, if you ever work with a larger team, you will know that you have some platform engineering work you can relate to or maybe are interested in. So I just wanted to share about what it means really. So the way I look at it is, as a regular developer, like a feature developer or app developer, you build an app for users, right? Customers. Well, as a platform developer, I see it more as the other developers are your customers or your users, right? So instead of delivering for users, you're now delivering for other developers, which I think is quite interesting to look at, because if at first, if you're a feature engineer in a larger company, you most likely are in charge of 1 or 2 or 3 feature modules, and you really are like focused on like, I'm in this module, I get a couple of dependencies and I gotta make sure I reach my deadlines, right? I get UI, gotta make this work, build the stuff and make sure it's released. Well, as a platform engineer, you're not building features anymore, not UI facing features as much really, or at all. It's more about building the tools and the processes, anything really that helps other developers. So I'm just gonna give a couple examples. One of them was, we had a monolithic application and we needed to go to a modular application. Well, as a feature engineer, you can just be like, oh, I'm just gonna make my feature module, now it's done. Well, no, there are dependencies, there is code inside the main application that had to be extracted. So there needed to be a certain order of operations to be able to do that. And as a platform engineer, you work more application-wide, right? Instead of focusing on just a feature, you focus on the entire application. So in my case, I would, figure out what to extract, which modules, which order, and then build scripts to help me extract stuff. I remember I would, copy folders out, and that was fine at first, but then I realized the Git history would not be copied with it, so I updated my script to improve the copying with the Git history, like a lot of details there. But then once the P work was done, now it was about getting other teams to migrate too. So they had their code in the main application. They needed to extract that too. So that means, planning, communication, convincing people why it's more important, than other things. Because if their teams are having certain priorities, the last thing they want is a platform team to be like, hey, yeah, put that aside and just spend 2 weeks on this other side thing that has no apparent benefits, right? Because that's also the thing, like it's very maintenance heavy, right? Like if you extract a module out of an app, as a developer, you're like, yeah, I got a module, right? It's easier to build, all that stuff. But as a product owner, you're kind of like, yeah, we're now not releasing any features. So it requires some diplomacy and like some understanding of what other teams need, because you kind of come in with like busy work, right? It's kind of like if I tell my kids to clean up their rooms, they're kind of like, I don't want to, but once they do, they're happy that they can find their toys. It's maybe not the exact analogy, but I do find like, yeah, it's kind of like a necessary evil. It's more maintenance heavy. Other examples are the platform engineers keep the CI/CD, the continuous integration, up and running, right? Like, for example, you may start small and you just maybe make, as an indie developer, you may make a small build on your machine and then publish it to the App Store. But, once you get a larger team, you want more processes, you want more checks, more scripts, maybe you want a script that checks if all localized keys are properly translated in multiple languages or if there are duplicate keys. Maybe you want to make a script that checks if the app size has increased. Maybe during a release you want to check like, oh, if my app build is now 5% or larger or more than the last app build, well, now we need some sort of warning to go off, right? So these are kind of the scripts that you would also be building as a platform engineer. It's kind of like the infrastructural stuff. And yes, it's kind of like invisible, but it's still important it gets done. Because in a smaller company, you don't really have this problem as quickly, but like if your app becomes larger, you have more teams and so on, these things become more and more important. And I guess I forgot to mention, like, yeah, when you would need a platform engineer. And I would say, once your team grows, you get a certain pain points. You get these pain points like, there's teams that are kind of stepping on each other's toes. The app size increase, like I mentioned. Build times become really large. The CI is hard to keep stable. Tests become flaky. So I think those things can be kind of an indicator that you need to take someone off the feature development team and into a platforming role. So when features are becoming too painful to launch, that is usually a good indicator. But it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you now take someone that's maybe very, like an expert at building things, to now remove them from building things and actually make them support other developers. But I think if you're not sure, you can always give it a shot. Like maybe you should try for a couple sprints, see if it makes sense to have someone do this kind of work. Because chances are this one person can accelerate the entire team. So it's kind of a multiplier effect there. Yeah. So let's see what other things you do as a mobile platform engineer. So I think a lot of it is also about quality standards, right? You want the app releases to go as smoothly as possible, and they can break in many ways or be blocked in many ways. Like you could have, for example, a feature team A that depends on a third-party module, and feature team B that depends on a third-party module. Now, if feature team A has their own like sample app and they are just building in their bubble, and then they update their dependency version. So let's say they have let's say an analytics library like an SDK they depend on, and it's version 2, and they update it to version 3, like a major update. But feature team B is still on version 2. Now there's a mismatch, and individually it will compile just fine, but once you compile the app, now the dependencies cannot be resolved, right? One module depends on version 2, one other one depends on version 3. So these kind of things happen more and more the larger your team becomes, because you have sort of these feature teams that are working in silos. The larger your teams become, your application becomes. So you want someone to sort of oversee this app-wide like consistency, because it can definitely happen that this happens, this dependency conflict happens, and now the release is blocked. I've been there. Another example is when people would just update the log file of a dependency. So instead of having the dependencies resolved by the package manager, they would just go in the log file and just update the dependency, not realizing they are bypassing the resolver. Like they're saying like, oh, I'm a better dependency resolver than the actual resolver. So that would work when they merge maybe, but then it causes problems down the line. So you may want some sort of process, or even better if you can catch it with automated tooling, to make sure these problems don't happen, because these problems are really painful to sort of have like at the end near a release cycle, right? Like when you're making a release build. Other problems were, for example, like I mentioned, app size increase, or maybe there's too many stray files, or maybe there are files that should not be packaged in the app build itself. So you want someone that maybe can either inspect or write tools or set up some CI scripts to detect this, right? And the earlier that you can detect it, the better, because with mobile apps, we cannot roll back easily. So the release process is kind of like holy, in my opinion. You really need to make sure it goes really smoothly. And anything that can go wrong, right? Yeah, I think as a mobile platform engineer, like there's so much to talk about for releases, right? Like there could be feature teams that want a hotfix at the end and that blocks the release, and now you have to figure out how to put that in, right, and make sure it doesn't break anything else, because if you have the entire application checked by tests and then also QA and all of manual checks, and then you want to apply a hotfix, it's kind of risky, right, because maybe other features can break. Yeah, so that's kind of the stuff you're involved with. Other stuff was making sure the quality standards are higher. So some people who join the company, they've never even written UI tests. Some people don't write regular unit tests. So maybe there are some ways you can improve that. What I did was, well, basically we had like a checklist before we merged. So we had a checklist, if you build a feature, you gotta have UI tests, unit tests, it was like a long list of stuff you had to be doing. If you wrote a bug fix, you have a checklist for a bug fix. So one of the rules is you cannot merge without a fix, like without a test for the fix. I mean, it could be anything really. Like documentation is a good one. When I joined Twitter, for example, there was a lot of documentation, but I wish there was a sort of like how to build a feature documentation. So very much like an umbrella doc that was like, linked to the analytics documentation, linked to the views documentation, linked to the colors documentation, but it was just like a sort of high level, like this is how you build a feature. You get these components, get these colors, get these things, get this script, get this analytics framework, blah, blah, and then it will work. And at ING, I would write a ton of documentation. I would joke sometimes because there were people at my desk with multiple people with their laptops open to ask for questions. And I realized even though I like helping people, it was still kind of a bottleneck, because if I'm like answering all these questions all the time and they're the same questions, I realized, no, I should document them, right? Then I can link to documentation. And as a result, I got better questions. Right? Like if we said, the architecture should be view models, well, they will go use a view model. But if I wrote documentation about how we implement view models, some examples and so on, and if someone had a question, you would get a deeper questions. So they may say stuff like, I know we should use view models, but I have like a lot of nested views and each view has its own view model. So how do I go about that? I think that was very interesting to solve, and we made something better as engineers, as a team, because we got more difficult questions and we managed to answer them. And then if we managed to answer them, we can also document them. So it's kind of also a support role, right? Like it's not really like, oh, now today I'm gonna just build this shared library script and that is my day. No, there's always gonna be an interruption, right? Maybe the hard disk is full on the continuous integration servers. Maybe there's a dependency clash you need to help resolve. Maybe, you know, the new iOS version is coming, right? Like, how would you get everybody to be ready for a new iOS release? Right? I remember there is, you know, you have the beta period, but you also have the current build on beta devices. Then you have the new build on the beta device, and then you have the final build on the real device. And you know, you can build versions for beta OSs on the phone or for OSs that people have on their phone. It's like so many versions to test. So you need to sort of have like a matrix, like which versions are we building against which OSs, and are they valid? Are they, you know, are they working? Are they well tested, and so on? So every year we would have an annual OS update release, but it also meant the CI had to be updated. So that meant we had to communicate, you know, which version the CI is running, when we're going to the next Xcode version, in our case as an iOS developer. Also make sure people stop using all the Xcode versions. So yeah, if you're a small team, you can, you know, just update Xcode, check the warnings and compilation errors, and, you know, fix what you need and continue using the cool new features. But as a big application, as a bigger team, you have to really coordinate this, right? So that's also something the platform developers did, that we as platform developers helped with. Yeah, and there's like tooling, like we would set up like linters, you know, also SonarQube for quality checks. So the idea behind it is that originally I was also in charge of quality, code quality, and that kind of meant I was sort of pushed into this code police role, but I quickly learned that's not the way to go. Like if I would review pull requests and just be like very nitpicky and like you should do this and do that, you know, it's better to hear it from tooling. Like if you're building an application, your compiler yells at you, you're kind of like, oh, it's annoying, but now it works, that's fine. But if a person does it, like if a person has all these like nitpicks, you kind of get annoyed, like, oh, there he is again, you know, like commenting on my pull request. Let me make sure it just gets merged before they notice. Well, it's better to use tooling, I quickly learned. So it's about setting up proper linters, right? Like if there are certain code styles you want to conform to. And I guess that also hits the next topic, which is the opinions of developers, right? There's the code style discussions, right? Should you, you know, do brackets go on the new line or not? And what about long initializers? Is that a new line for every parameter or not? So you want to kind of get rid of those style discussions. They go on forever. And then someone new joins the company, and then you have another round of style discussions. So you want to incorporate the style decisions into your tooling. So you get a linter, make sure it's all in there, and it severely reduces the style discussions. And then there's architectural discussions, right? Someone will read a blog post and be like, oh, we should use RX Swift. Or someone says, I had this multiple times where someone would come to me and say, you know, I read this book called Clean Code, like as if we haven't read it before. And they were like, yeah, every function must now be maximum 3 lines. And you know, I was kind of the opinion, like, yeah, let's not be dogmatic. Like, let's, you know, use what makes sense for us. So it's kind of, I found it really difficult because you're here to support developers, but you're also kind of an authority in the sense that you have to make the decision, like which architectural patterns you would allow or disallow, you know, like code-specific rules, even Git-specific rules. You would decide as a platform team, like how you would all use Git, right? Do you use feature branches, trunk-based development, you know, stacked diffs, which would be, I guess, my favorite nowadays, but that's not always possible. But yeah, you have people come in and they're like, hey, I'm used to using RX Swift or Clean Code or Viper, View models, View presenters, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a new MVPI something every day. Every week, so you have to make a decision, right? Like, are you just gonna have everybody be a free-for-all developer and then have like 600 patterns in your architecture? Or are you gonna be like, no, we allow for a couple of architectures, like each feature can have, for example, a view model-based pattern, or something else specific if needed. But in my case, I was very happy to sort of enforce view models because it was a very simple way that people could quickly pick up. I also had to disappoint people that wanted RX Swift, not because I was severely against it, but because we had developers of all levels. So they would join, yeah, and didn't want them to also learn the company, also learn the code base, also learn how to even deliver feature, and then also learn RX Swift. And then I guess that touches the next point is third-party libraries. I'm kind of allergic to them now because things like, you know, external patterns that are sort of optional, right? I prefer to keep it simple because if you would have depended on, for example, RX Swift, well, then there would have been a migration a few years after to get rid of it again. Whereas view models, they're kind of almost timeless. Sure, we went to like, you know, from imperative to declarative UI, so things change, but I think simpler is better. That's really what I learned. Like a lot of developers are like really keen on like, yeah, let's introduce this pattern. I heard this and I want this and this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm showing you we have a giant application with, you know, just view models. It works quite well, you know. So that was always a discussion I was having a lot. But then the danger is that you're just saying no to everything. So it's also about having other teams sort of experiment with new architectures, right? Like, so there needs to be some sort of way for developers to experiment. So they would have maybe a feature module that is developed in a completely different way, and then they could share their learnings, right? So I guess, yeah, as a platform developer, you're in touch with many different topics, right? Anything really about building UI, pretty much. Yeah, I guess I could share more later. I think I will also make a video about like how to become a mobile platform developer. But I think this should be, give you a good indicator of what to expect. I hope you found it useful, and please check out my article that's also on Substack on mobilesystemdesign.substack.com. And if you want more information about mobile system design in general, I also have a book on mobilesystemdesign.com. You could just reach out to me for any questions. Thank you.